All right. Good evening. Good evening. This is Charles, the instructor, Exodus Logistics Learning Center. Today is Wednesday, the 8th of November. This is our Wednesday edition of our Dispatcher 101 training. Earlier today, I put out a YouTube video. Excuse me a little bit, my voice is coming back. Put out a YouTube video because I got several calls today from people saying that they wish they would have came across our training earlier. The trainings that they've taken weren't what they paid for. The value of what they paid for was not equal to the training that they received. That's how I should put it. And um, I said, okay, so let me invite some people in, those people who are on the fence, who want to consider a training from an instructor, to kind of give them an overview of what a dispatch training will should be, right? Should the value you should get, right? So how many of you are guests in here tonight and you may have seen that YouTube video earlier today that I put out, like a 5-minute video? Um, so but I have some guests in here. I see, oh, hey, Violetta, Miss Harris, how are you? Um, so okay, somebody's trying to log into that. Okay, so how many of you are guests in here who may have seen that YouTube video earlier today, or just a guest in here who was just curious about the training? So, all right, I'm a guest and a former student. Okay, former student. Oh, wow. Former Lady T's Dispatch. I'm assuming you're looking to come back. You're circling back around. 226-443. Okay, good, good. Hopefully we'll provide you with some content to help you with your dispatch journey. Okay. So tonight I'll do some Q&A, as we always do, some beginning level training, what it is to be a dispatcher, to start your journey as a dispatch company, a dispatch business. Okay. Um, Getting funds together to come back. It may be cheaper than you think. So, so what is a dispatcher? What is an independent freight dispatcher? Not someone who dispatches for a trucking company and just dispatch their trucks, but someone who dispatch for independent owner operators. Okay. And separate independent owner operators all over the country. You can, if as many as you can handle, right? That's what we're talking about, those types of dispatchers. Now, before you even get to that point, you want to be able to have your company set up. So how do you set your business up? How do you structure your company from a dispatching perspective? What is the easiest entry point for starting a company, starting a business as an independent freight dispatcher? Something as simple as that also needs to be, you need to be mindful of, right? How will you structure your company? What type of name will you come up with? You know, even something as simple as the name, right? Like a name like logistics, right? If you just intend on dispatching and not doing anything else, let's say after a year or so, you don't think about going into freight brokering or starting a trucking company, then something as simple as dispatcher or dispatching in your name is fine. Otherwise, you may want to put more of a universal name in the name of your company, like logistics, right? Jamisha said, LegalZoom will help you do your LLC. It does everything, and I will allow you to break down will allow you to break down the cost into 3 payments. So that's a third party company that will assist you. We have in our business setup, I believe LegalZoom is in our business setup, one of the companies that we suggest. I think Rocket Lawyer, LegalZoom, InkFile, I believe, is one. So right here on the screen. So LegalZoom is one. So the first one is, you want your local Secretary of State, go with them. InkFile, LegalZoom, In Business, My Corporation, Ink Authority, and Rocket Lawyer. Those are good companies to look into for structuring your company. Well, you can simply do it yourself as well, right? If you want to save that expense. If you don't have the time to do it yourself and you're considering third party, then of course you want to select the reputable ones, right? So, but the key with the naming convention is whether or not you want to only dispatch and not do anything else, or if you want to dispatch and then later on pivoting your company into a freight brokerage or a trucking company. So you should consider your name with those thoughts in mind, how you scale later on down the line. Okay. After that, some type of formal training, right, to help you understand what dispatching for the owner operators consists of. What is it about, right? What type of trucks do I initially start out with as far as a dispatcher? Who do I target? And that could be based off of what area of the country you're in, right? Which types of trucks are most prevalent or most frequently moving in those areas. You see them flowing all the time down your major interstates. So it stands to reason that you should target those trucks in that area. You get that most traffic, right? So these are some of the things that we talk about in the class. We talk about other things, load boards, freight brokers, strategies on booking the loads, cents per mile, all types of things. Right now, for the guests, I want to see if there's anything that you need, any questions that you may need answered that you felt that you did not get answered in a previous training. So I want to open the floor for a second for that. Are there any preliminary questions before we get started? And you can either type it in the chat or unmute yourself if you so choose, if you have that ability. No questions? No questions. Okay, now I extended the question offer, so no one has a question. Okay.
I have a question, Mr. Charles. It's Jamisha. If I did want to scale my business later on down the road, would put in anything with the term solutions or logistics in it, would that mess up the LLC if I wanted to add trucks later on down the road, or would I need a completely new LLC?
No, it would not. So what is the name of your company will be now, starting out? What is it currently?
Trailblazing Solutions.
Okay, and then later on you will change it to.
Well, I'm just saying, could I keep that name, or would I need to change it if I added trucks later on down the line?
You can keep that name because that sounds like that will turn into some kind of a parent name, Trailblazing Solutions, and then you can have DBAs, aliases, or doing business as under Trailblazing Solutions. So Trailblazing Solutions, doing business as Trailblazing Dispatch Service, doing business as Trailblazing Transportation for the trucking side, doing business as Trailblazing Freight Brokerage or Trailblazing Brokerage. Yes, disclaimer, I am not a tax attorney. Thank you, LaDonna. Yes, but it's always a good idea to separate the entities for organizational purposes and liability purposes. And I advise to look into getting that information, that advice from a CPA, so they can kind of keep you in line. So
okay.
Shiante says she named hers Freight Masters Logistics. Okay. Shiante, I'm extending invitations for next week for local students who still wants to get some more training. You can come in locally, obviously for free, since you're local, because we're having our week-long training again next week, the 13th through the 17th.
Okay, I'll be there.
All right. So let's see. So that's a great question that was asked about the naming and when you decide to scale. So And then another thing you want to consider is what type of carriers, within the formal training, we show the different types of carriers to start out with that will make your job a little bit simpler, to make your entry point, your barrier to entry easy. You don't want to jump into dispatching for a box truck or a hot shot in an area where box truck freight and hot shot freight is not flowing, right? So you want to be mindful of, you want to do your market analytics, see what's moving in the area. So the question becomes, well, how do I know what's moving? What are the resources we have back here that can show me where things are moving, right? And then how do I know which equipment type to start with, right? As a beginner dispatcher, right? How do I know that? Well, we advise there's large semi trucks out here, semi equipment types. An equipment type is the tractor, the truck itself, the power unit, and the type of trailer. That defines the equipment type. The trailer type is actually what the equipment type is defined by. So, for example, a dry van trailer here connected to a truck or a power unit or a tractor defines this as a 53-foot dry van. This is 53 feet in length, the trailer, I should say. So there are three major equipment types that will make your job as a new dispatcher easy to come into. And they are here. The dry van, which is here with all its specifications. And this is what one looks like on the inside. This is a real clean. Whoever owned this one kept theirs up. This must be brand spanking new. A brand new trailer. This can't be somebody's used trailer. This is a brand new trailer. Gotta be. And so look how clean that thing is. And it has the vertical tracks instead of the horizontal E-tracks. So, brand new, nice one. I might get me one of these. The second one is the refrigerated trailers, the reefers, right? The hot and cold controlled trailers where you can temperature control, where you can move freight at a certain temperature, right? And here's a schematic chart of what the functionality of the reefer unit does. The fans to keep the flow going, the airflow, the motor, things like that. The bulkhead, the engine with the compressors and the components, all the components on the engine, and things of that nature. Because you got sensors in the front, sensors in the back to keep the flow going on the reefer unit, right? Even on the floor, okay? And then here's what it looks like in real life, the actual trailer itself, not connected to a tractor or a power unit or a truck. That's number two. That's the second major equipment types, the three major ones. And then the third one is the flatbed with all of its specifications, right? So at some point, you guys are going to get these three equipment types down to a science, master them, because we pound it at you because it's a known fact that these are the three popular equipment types that's out here on the roads the most. You can find loads for them on the load boards the easiest, and they pay the better rates. We can easily go to a load board and do a load search for one of these three, and you'll find a larger result set for those three, than you would for the other specialty ones, the box trucks, sprinter van, cargo vans, and hot shots in any area of the country, in any part of the country. So with that data being said, then it just makes sense to start as a new dispatcher with the three equipment, targeting drivers, owner-operators who drive those types of equipment types as opposed to the others, the specialties, which is what I just mentioned here, the specialty ones. Power units, box trucks, hot shots, sprinter vans, and cargo vans. Now, you're going to run into an issue, and this is a known fact. Any owner-operator who drives one of these specialty equipment types is going to want you as their dispatcher quicker and more so than any owner-operator who drives the three major equipment types. So why is that? Well, it's because the specialty equipment types, they need to keep their equipment types filled with freight more so than the semis, because the semis, they can find loads. Those owner operators can find loads with or without you more so than the specialty equipment type owner operators can, right? It's harder. It's more of a challenge to find loads for box trucks, power units, hot shots, sprinter vans, and cargo vans than it is for the three major equipment types. So, but once you get an owner operator of the three semis, the three major semis, in an agreement to be their dispatcher, then you can find loads for them easy. So, Charles and Don, can you speak to the different types of covers, tarps, or flatbed accessories? Some look like dry vans with wraps around them. Okay, so yeah, sure, certainly. So in the flatbed category, you have different flatbed types. Let's talk about the different flatbed types. You have step decks, okay? And let's do it like this. Let me show you a visual graphic example so it'd be easier to follow, okay? That way, because I know most of us are visual learners, right? So let's look at it like that. So I'm going to I always go to Google and I click images. So I want to see an image of it. So let's go to a step deck. Step deck trailers is in the flatbed category, okay? This is a step deck trailer right there, right here. This is a step deck because it comes from the tail of the trailer up to about 3/4 or maybe 7/8 to the front of the trailer. Then it steps up like a step deck, okay? I'll talk about the different trailer types in the flatbed category first, and then I'll mention the accessories that come with flatbed equipment types, okay? So here's a step deck type of flatbed. Now, we deal with mainly, if you get a carrier in the flatbed category, it's usually a standard flatbed, the standard 48 or 53 by 102, the standard ones, right? Which is right here. Let's go right there, flat. There's no step in it. It's just a flat skateboard. Looks like a skateboard, just a flatbed, okay? But the other image, it steps up, a step deck. So that's one category. Can anybody name another category in another flatbed category? What's another flatbed category?
You have drop deck,
Drop deck. There you go.
which means that instead of one step, it drops down twice. You have a Conestoga.
Conestoga. This got to be Carlos. What's up, man?
How you doing, brother?
You
You
got
have a
Conestogas, which is the curtains.
but you also have a Conestoga style, which like the lumber companies use, which with the racks in it.
Yeah, exactly. I forgot all about them, to be honest with you.
You also have Conestogas that have refrigerated units on it to keep temperatures on certain steel products.
There you go. So here's a Conestoga. This is a curtain. It's a flat, but it got a curtain around it, like a skirt, kind of almost like not a skirt, but a curtain around it. So, yep. And then you got double dry. Somebody mentioned a gooseneck. The larger one. So the goosenecks are more like the ones for heavy hauls, like oversized and overdimensional.
Oh yeah. You have so many of those.
So many of those. So gooseneck trailers.
Low boy.
One, the low boys, the possum trailers, cattle, all these different types. But these are goosenecks, the major ones for the excavators and things like that. Some of these goosenecks, they're more like in the hot shot categories, but the big boy goosenecks are the heavy haul ones, oversized and overdimensional. I'm trying to find one. Here's one that's closely related to it because you see this big. So that's called a removable gooseneck right there. That's the gooseneck right there. Where did that word gooseneck come from? Somebody give me pop quiz. Well, not pop quiz, but trivia. Why is it called a gooseneck? Why do you think they came up with that name? What's the history behind that? You don't have to know that. This is a dispatch class only. So, but So these are the different flatbed categories. There are others, but these are the different flatbed categories. Joe asked that question. That's a great question. The different types of, now you got different types of tarp covers. You got the different drop side, the drop lengths, right? You got 4, 6, and 8 foot drops with the tarps, right? So tarps, I can spell it right. And tarps are for the flatbed categories to cover up certain commodities that the shipper or broker needs at that time, to cover up different commodities. And the lengths of the tarps depends on what the needs of it for, of the tarp is for, right? Tarps for flatbed trailers. So you got 4 foot drop, 6 foot. So these are the different tarp types, okay? And you can see how it's covered. Covering tarps is a beast. You got to be in shape, right? Especially over time. As you get older, it's like So
Can we talk about some more of the equipment that goes along with those flatbeds?
right. I was going to mention the other accessories like chains, binders,
Core racks.
dunnage,
Core racks.
core rack, all the core racks, those different accessories that goes with the, depending on the type of owner operator with that flatbed style and what they do with it determines what accessories they have with their flatbeds. Depends on what they haul, right? So dunnage is just basically wood blocks, like 2x4s or 4x4s or 2x4s or whatever the wood blocks are, to help wedge in certain things or keep things steady and consistent and from moving, right? And then you have pipe stakes that goes every so many feet along the marginal perimeters of the flatbed to keep things from rolling off the side, right? And you pipe stake it in, you strap it in so it won't move and bind it in, chain and bind it in. So chains and binders go together because you chain something and you have the binders to ratchet it in and tighten it up so it won't move, right? And then you have the regular fat boy straps, the fatties. I call them fat boys, the yellow ones, the fat ones right here, like these. So we call these the fat boys, right there, the yellows, straps. Okay, so these are accessories that go, even the headache rack on the flatbed. Some flatbeds come with the headache racks, others don't. Right? If you're hauling lumber, it keeps that stuff from sliding to hit the tail of the or hit the cab of the truck. Right? The headache rack is there to prevent stuff like that from happening. It's called a headache rack. Okay. So these are different things, accessories, and different types of flatbed, different types of accessories that go with the flatbed, depending on the owner operator and what they haul and how they haul and what equipment they use to haul the commodities with, could determine the accessories that they have. So when you're talking to if you get a flatbed carrier and they say they haul certain commodities, you want to make sure, hey, okay, do you got any? Now, some questions are kind of obvious, but you still want to ask anyway, just to hear what they have to say. You got any chains and binders, or you got any tarps? Because some flatbed carriers do no tarp loads, right? They don't want to tarp the load because they know it's work. You got to throw that tarp over there, strap it on both sides, make sure it's tight and everything. That's work. So they charge for that. $250, $500, whatever, right? And then some flatbed carriers they love tarping. I don't know why, it's kind of crazy, but they get that extra money. They can negotiate more money. So that's the flatbed category. Now with the drive-in and reefer, you're mainly dealing with, I don't know, just regular vertical and horizontal E-tracks with the straps. You may have some load bars. You may have some cloths in there to kind of wedge in some freight. You got your regular hand truck and pallet jack, maybe. So Joe said, would that be touch freight if they have to tarp? Yes, so it can be, but sometimes in the load, the broker will say, well, this load needs to be tarped. So it may not necessarily, it's just included in the rate. It could be included in the rate, and then other times it's considered touch freight, but in most cases it's included in the rate because that's the requirement of the broker, because the broker is being required by their customer. This commodity needs to be tarped. Mr. Broker, before you pass it along to your authorized motor carrier, it needs to be tarped. So if you give a load as a broker to a carrier that should have been tarped and it gets to the receiver, the consignee, guess what's going to happen? They're going to reject it because they required from their customer or from the seller, which is the shipper, that the load, this commodity that we're buying from you, shipper, to the receiver, it needs to be covered. We value this freight so much that we need it to be covered. And we're paying for that service. So you make sure that your broker or your direct trucking company that you talk to tarps this freight before it gets to our facility. Otherwise, we're not going to buy it. We're going to reject it and send it back to you. We don't want it because this is what we require. So how much in addition should be included for tarping? It varies carrier to carrier, depends on how much tarp you're using, 4-foot drops, 6-foot or 8-foot. Depends on what they're using it for. How much, depends on how much area they have to cover when they're tarping, in other words. So, okay, that determines the price. I've seen it minimum $250. I've seen as high as $500 to tarp because it's a lot of work. You're putting 3 different cloths. You looping it. If you got a full truckload, 48,000 pounds or 38 to 48,000 pounds, you're throwing tarp in sections over there, and then you got to strap it in. That takes time. And you're doing it by yourself. You see? So as a carrier, these are things you got to consider. So great question, Joe. Great question. With the dry van and the reefer, it's not as laborious when it comes to accessories than it is with the flatbeds. As you can see, a lot of work, right? So, any other questions? That was a great question. You must got a Oh, Mr. Charles Hope, how do you establish and maximize consistency with freight dispatching for power only with 1 or more trucks as a new carrier? Interesting. Keep them in areas that maybe near ports and things like that. How do you respond to challenges that are inevitable as a new carrier with a small fleet? So what kind of challenge? Give me an example of a challenge that is considered inevitable as a small fleet carrier. Small fleet being what? 10 or less, 5 or less, let's say 5 or less. 5 or less trucks. What challenge would a new small fleet carrier have? The number one challenge is if their authority is new, they're going to have challenges getting freight from being trusted by either direct customers or freight brokers because they haven't proven themselves because their authority is new. They haven't had a chance to haul any freight. So they haven't proven whether they can do that, whether they can do OTP and OTD. OTP stands for on-time pickup. What is OT? If OTP stands for on-time pickup, what does OTD stand for?
On-time delivery.
On-time delivery. Ding, ding, ding. Very good. So new carriers, that'll be a challenge, especially if I'm a new broker and if I'm a broker, not a new broker, if I'm a broker and I'm looking to entertain using this carrier. Now, they had a conversation with me, and I know they've been driving as a company driver for 20 years. So I know they understand how to operate the vehicle, the equipment type, but their authority is new. So in the eyes of the broker, we're looking at the authority, the operating authority. We're not looking at the driving experience. Now, if you become a broker these days, you could probably factor that in. I know you have a new authority, but how long have you been driving? Let me give you some consideration. I know you just got your authority. You've been a company driver for years, let's say 10, 15 years. So I understand you know how to drive the vehicle, but you all of a sudden decided to get your own operating authority. So in the eyes of me, the broker, and other brokers, it's going to give the appearance that you don't know what you're doing because your authority is new. But I'm going to give you a chance because you told me you drove for 10 years. So I think 10 years should be more than enough time to prove to people that you understand how to operate the vehicle, right? So I'm going to give you a shot. And then they give them a shot, and it turns out they do something that's wrong, right? Some brokers have had that experience. They gave someone a shot, and because they had a number of years of driving under a company as a company driver, but then decided to get their own operating authority as an owner operator, now that new authority is working with a factoring company. The factoring company can assist in that way to help mitigate the risk that the broker is thinking that the new carrier has as being a new carrier with a new authority. They can, cover that a little bit. So those are some of the things to consider. And then the driver just being consistent with on-time pickup, on-time deliveries, limiting the amount of claims that could be filed against the insurance of the driver, and just doing honest work, just doing their jobs as motor carriers. And then you can help them as a dispatcher in that process, especially for new, and they'll be more willing to work with you as a dispatcher if you're willing to help them help their authority age over time by putting them in front of brokers who's willing to work with them, and then tracking them or following them and making sure that they do the job correctly and thoroughly, because you guys are in it together. If you happen to be working with a new carrier, you're in it together. So that could be a way for you as a dispatcher to kind of leverage that to assist them. Okay. So great question. Who asked that question? Riaz? I think so, yes. You're welcome. Tarps, trailer walls, etc. Okay, I'm just looking at the question. If the goods damage the trailer, how do you go about billing? So that's a great question too, Joel. If the goods, so if you're saying if you pick up freight from a shipper, and then while you're transporting it to the receiver, unbeknownst to you, when the doors are open at the receiver, the freight damaged the trailer, right? So the question becomes, how do you handle that billing? That's probably going to go towards your insurance. Now, the freight is damaged too, so the receiver may not accept the freight. They may reject it. They may accept the majority of the freight that didn't damage the trailer and then accept the rest, or they may reject the whole shipment. It depends on the receiver. Everybody has the autonomy to select which way to go. Most receivers will reject the whole thing and not try to salvage pallets unless they really needed some pallets. They needed some of those pallets that were very important. They needed it for a project or whatever. They may accept some of those pallets and reject the rest, file a claim against the bond of the broker or the insurance of the carrier. And as far as the carrier is concerned, if it damaged the trailer, that could be a fault of the carrier. They didn't secure the freight correctly. They didn't strap it in correctly. So when they made turns, it could have shifted and damaged the walls in the trailer, depending on how heavy it is. There's several factors that go into consideration there, and who's the fault for what, So as long as the carrier is doing their job on their side, then there's no fault against them. Now, when they get to a shipper and they can't see the freight being loaded, and they're forced to stay in their trailers and they can't even strap everything. Yeah. So can you explain how to book loads for one company with 3 or 4 trucks? Certainly. Can you explain again how to book loads for one company that has 3 or 4 trucks? Are the 3 or 4 truck, Lady T's dispatching, are the 3 or 4 trucks, are they the same equipment types? What area of the country are they in, right? So this is what I would do. If they are the same equipment types in the same area, whatever area of the country they are in, I would try to get them in the Midwest. Let's say they're 3 dry vans or 3 or 4 dry vans. I'm going to put them under a broker that needs capacity for dry vans going into and out of the Midwest, and keep them running with that same broker to build that relationship over time. So it's easier to dispatch equipment types that are the same for the same brokers going in the same lanes. Sometimes it gets difficult for dispatchers when you have a mixture of equipment types. Let's say you got one dry van owner operator company, one reefer, and 2 flatbed owner-operator companies. So that's 4 different trucking companies, 4 different MCs. You're all over the place, right? But if you focus on a specific, starting out at least starting out, focus on a specific target niche equipment type, like all dry vans or all flatbeds or all reefers, it makes your dispatching duties a little bit simpler because you're only dispatching for one equipment type, but you have multiple numbers of them. You have 3 or 4 of them, but they're the same equipment types, dry vans. So you can target brokers who have capacity or who have commodities that go on general freight, that go on dry vans, and keep those trucks running like that and back and forth, back and forth. So that's the kind of the art and science of it, you know, starting out as new dispatchers. And over time, as that becomes like automated for you, automated the process, then you can entertain bringing on different equipment types, okay? When first starting out of the 3 main vehicle types, is there a particular type out of those in which you should be targeting? So as a dispatcher, it depends on what area of the, let's say you're in a country or in a zone in an area like the Midwest. This is for Jonathan. So if you're in the Midwest, the 3 major equipment types, they're moving in that area a lot. There's a high frequency of inbound and outbound freight for dry vans, flatbeds, and reefers into and out of the Midwest zone or the Midwestern states, Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky, Illinois, Indiana, the Midwestern zone. So let me show you what I mean by that. Right. So Midwest zone, okay? So when you first get started, we know from our analytics and our experience and dispatching personally and other students that a lot of the freight moves through the Midwest. That's the #1 zone. You won't have a problem finding freight coming into and out of the Midwestern zone, zone 4, Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Kentucky, Illinois, Missouri, and you can even sprinkle a little bit parts of maybe half of zone 5, Wisconsin, Iowa, right? Wisconsin cheese, right? So refrigerated freight, commodities, right? So if you target the area, let's say you're from, Jonathan, you're from the Midwest, start dispatching for carriers in your area first and then branch out. Now, can you dispatch for other owner operators all over the country? Of course you can, but it's best to start in your area, an area that you already are familiar with, right? So you provide a better service to your carriers by being able to help them in that area as far as navigating and things like that. Now, most carriers, if you are an owner-operator driving a truck, you should know the roads. Otherwise, you shouldn't be driving, right? So, but as a dispatcher, you can add an added service to that, you know, add what's called a value add by being familiar with the same area that they live in and they come out of, their domicile residence, their domicile states, and dispatch them into and out of there. And you could either keep them running in the Midwest or run them down to the Southeast, like Georgia, Virginia, North and South Carolina, run them over to the Southwest, Texas, namely. You can eat all day in Texas, right? Houston, DFW, Dallas-Fort Worth, right? San Antonio. I wouldn't go too far to the western side of Texas because you, especially with a flatbed, you're not getting a flatbed out of Midland and Pecos and those areas, right? You're gonna have to deadhead somewhere. But I know that for a fact. So but you can triangularly dispatch into and out of areas that have a high volume of inbound and outbound freight. What do I mean by that? Loads coming into the area and loads leaving the area. As a dispatcher, you only need 1 load at a time for your carrier. They can't load 2 loads at a time unless they're doing partials, LTLs, but full truckloads, 1 load at a time. Okay, so hopefully that helped you, Jonathan. Joe said, can you speak to carriers that appear to run first, last mile deliveries? I can, but yeah, last mile deliveries, you could probably talk about like mainly ports. Ports do last mile deliveries where they pick up containers that came in from, let's say that a container came into the port of Norfolk over here on the East Coast, or maybe Jersey, New York port, or Baltimore, or Charleston, right? Or Savannah. There's a port, Savannah, Jacksonville, Port of Manatee, Miami. You know, these ports down the eastern seaboard, they pick up containers with chassis, which is bare bone steel trailers. Those are the chassis. The containers get loaded with a gantry crane or a reach stacker from the ports or the ship. The gantry cranes grab them from the ship and sometimes put them on the ground or sometimes put them directly onto the chassis of that truck that came and got it. Or they'll put it on the ground and then a reach stacker come and grab it and reach stack it onto the chassis and secure it, of course. And in gate it, you got to come in first, you got to in gate, and then you have the out gate with all these different security checkpoints and all this other stuff with the ports. It's a mess. But anyway, and take it to its last mile delivery. Most cases is going either directly to a retail store or maybe to a secondary distribution center, a DC, right? So that it can be deconsolidated. Deconsolidation means whatever, because it could have been multiple shipments on that one container. You have 20-foot and 40-foot, what's called ISO boxes, the international boxes, containers that come in. You got domestic containers and you have ISOs, international, that come into the country from overseas, right? And they could have multiple shipments on it. Typically one container does not have one shipment on it. Typically one container has multiple shipments on it, okay? So when it goes to a distribution center, it's usually deconsolidated and all those shipments are separated. And then the LTL companies come to the distribution center and pick up their specific shipment. So that's called transloading, okay? Where you transload a container by offloading its freight, separating it to who needs to get what, and then those companies come and get their freight and they're off to their last mile delivery locations, right? That process happens that's going on literally as we speaking right now. Transloading is happening, literally. That happens every day, nonstop, because you got distribution centers that are 24-hour, 24/7, right? So the only thing is some ports are not 24 hours. Ports are mainly like early morning to early afternoon or late in the evening, and then they're shutting down. They got to go home too. They may have swing shifts where some people come in and they work overnight, but in most cases, that's not the case. Okay. Let's see. Okay, I've been a CDL driver for 10 years, wanting to get out of this truck. LOL. Is there good money? Is good money as a dispatcher? Well, it depends on is it good money as a dispatcher? Yes. It depends on right now. So let's be realistic. The market is down as far as the rates being paid to the trucks. So in proportion to that, if the rates are down for the trucks in proportion, that means the rates are going to be down to the dispatchers in proportion to what they're being paid to the trucks. Because dispatchers charge a percentage for each load that they book for the carrier, or they charge a flat fee for how many loads they book for the week, right? It's more beneficial for dispatchers to charge a percentage for every load. And we say anywhere between 5 to 10%, okay? So with the rates down in proportion to that, so yeah. And then your hustle game has still got to be good. So even though the rates are down, you can still make up your money in volume because you can just acquire more trucks to dispatch to the point where you can't handle them by yourself. Then you scale your company and hire sub-dispatchers under you, either as W-2 employees or as 1099 independent contractors. Now, that's totally up to you how you structure your sub-dispatching duties under your dispatch company, okay? But you can still make up for the lost wages and rates by volume, more trucks, right? I often say and suggest that one dispatcher can typically handle between 3 to 5 trucks by themselves before they consider scaling and adding sub dispatchers to get those other trucks. Okay. So, go back to some more questions. What map is this? Oh, this is, so this map comes from the DAT load board. Is part of their, it's in their tools. It's under their zone mapping KMA directory. It's part of, so it's, but it's in our back office. I just added it to our back office. It's part of our, so it's a feature you get. I don't know if you are, whoever asked that question, I don't know if you are a member or not, but it is our zone mapping. And remember the concept of zones. For those who don't know, if you notice, you saw a chart and a legend on the map on the lower left side, what the Z's and all that stuff means. But the easiest way to remember that is, if you notice the zone numbers, you see where it says, for example, in Ohio, in the Midwest zone, zone 4, Z or Z4. Z stands for zone. Z-O-N-E, zone, right? So the 4 indicates the beginning number in the zip code of the states in that zone. Like Michigan, any city in Michigan, any city in Ohio, any city in Kentucky, Indiana, Illinois, and Missouri, or not Missouri, but Indiana, Kentucky, and Michigan, and Ohio, their zip codes begin with what number? 4. So now, knowing that, now you see a pattern. So if you go to zone 1, the states that are represented by zone 1, New York, Jersey, and Pennsylvania, their zip codes begin with 1. I'm in zone 2. I'm in Virginia. My zip code 23321. I begin, and so is West Virginia, North and South Carolina. Zone 3, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, so on and so forth. So that's how you keep track. So now when you hear verbiage from truck drivers saying, hey man, keep me running in zone, I need a dispatcher, but I need you to understand, I need to keep running for my dry van in zone, keep me in zone 2, 3, 4, 7, 6, and 5. And you saying, what the heck is you talking about? Right? Well, now you know. He wants to run in 4, 2, 3, 6, 7, and 5. Just basically right here, all these centralized, eastern and centralized states in the United States. He don't want to go anywhere near the Rocky Mountains over here on the left-hand side. He wants to stay away from that. And he don't want to go to zone 0 and 1 because that's the deep part of the Northeast. You're dealing with tows and certain times of the year, season, you're dealing with bad weather. So some truck drivers can actually educate you in the art of dispatching too. All you have to do is listen. You have to understand the terminology and then listen to what they're saying. They'll say, if like, for example, if a truck driver says, I want to run in flatland, just keep me running in the flatlands. Well, that's the southern part of the country. The southern corridor, right here. Like what's called the panhandle. Down here in these southern Creole type areas. That's the panhandle. The Georgias, the Alabamas, the Mississippis, the Louisiana. This is the panhandle because it's by what's called the Gulf of Mexico, which is right here. This is the Gulf of Mexico area. We'll call you ever heard the term the Florida Panhandle? That's the western side of the state of Florida. That's the Florida Panhandle. Now you got to go the entire panhandle consists of the coast off of Alabama, Florida, Mississippi, and Louisiana, and some parts of the lower southeastern side of Texas. Panhandle, the Gulf of Mexico, right here. Okay. So those are some of the things you'll pick up on as a dispatcher over time as you repeatedly talk to carriers who speak that jargon. Okay. Speak that language. All right. So let's see, go back in the chat and see if I can catch some questions. Otherwise, are there any questions? I'll keep it open for questions. I want to make sure, specifically to those individuals who are guests in here, but who have received training from other individuals, but are not satisfied. So Joe said, would these drivers be more freight forwarding clients? What drivers are you referring to? The last mile drivers? Yes, they can be from coming out of the ports. They can. Yes and no. freight forwarders, they mainly work with dredge companies, and then they also work with brokers in some cases. You can target freight forwarders because freight forwarders do what's called consolidation. They consolidate freight and then ship it out. Either freight forwarders are domestic as well as international. They deal with customs brokers, they deal with trucking companies. Some cases they deal with dredge because they're doing inbound and outbound as well. They are forwarding. Their main customers are the importers because they're receiving freights and goods internationally coming into this country. So they have to have a relationship with the customs brokers because the customs brokers are clearing the freight when it hits the U.S. soil. It has to clear customs. If it can't clear customs, guess what? It's going back out. It's not coming in. So they have to have a relationship, the freight forwarders with the customs brokers, and then with the exporters overseas, freight forwarder. They have to have a one-to-one relationship with them because they're shipping with all the paperwork, the BOLs, the customs invoices, the packing slips. That's all the paperwork that's involved in importing and exporting. You know, the Incoterms. These are some of the things you guys may not even realize until you get into that part of that arena. That's just another aspect of logistics. Now we're talking about global logistics and some concepts of international trade compliance. You have, in order to ship things internationally back and forth, you have to be in compliance, international trade. You're dealing with international trading now. So there's certain rules and regulations you have to follow or comply to, right? So where would we search the load boards for first and last miles? Also freight forwarding load search. So you're not going to see freight forwarding load search anywhere on the load board. That's not going to happen. They usually find you. There will never, I can't say never, but so load boards give you what's called spot market freight on the load boards, right? So you have contract freight and you have spot market freight types. Contract freight is where shippers tender loads directly to trucking companies, right? When trucking companies reject those tenders, those loads still need to be moved. So now the shippers say, okay, well, I need to entertain some freight brokers to see if these loads can get moved now because these direct trucking companies are not accepting our tender amounts. So let's see if I can work with some brokers to still move my freight, right? So now they give it to the brokers. Now the brokers will take those loads and chop it up, get their money out of it, and then throw the loads on the load boards, what's called the spot market. They'll put it on the spot market. So the load got tendered down from its high amount to a low spot market amount, right? So because those tender rejections moved it from contract level to the spot market level. So what you see on load boards are spot market rates. Okay, you have contract rates, then you have spot market rates. Okay, so very good question. The broker lets you know if it is a last mile, et cetera, count. Correct. So, all right. Any other questions? Nope. Yep. Maybe. And guess. Okay. Two-part question. Crystal says, are there any FMCSA regulations that dispatchers have to be aware, and how do you protect yourself from any liabilities? Great question. That's a two-part question. So I guess you asked the two parts, right? The first part was, are there any regulations that dispatchers have to be aware of? And then part two, how do you protect yourself from that? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Stay unmuted if you don't mind. So the FMCSA, what does the FMCSA stand for? I'm not asking you directly, Christian. I'm just speaking in general. It is the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. They are a subsidiary group, meaning under DOT, Department of Transportation. Okay. They are mainly concerned with, well, one of the names in their title, safety. compliance, safety, regulatory things, right? So the FMCSA about 6 months ago came out with some guidelines because they were challenged either legislatively through TIA. There's a group of disgruntled brokers that calls themselves TIA, Transportation Intermediaries Association. They argued that we need to redefine who brokers are and the role of dispatchers, right? So, because they thought that dispatchers, and to some degree, some were, I guess it got to a point where a number of dispatchers were behaving so much as brokers that brokers decided, well, we need to bring this to the attention of the FMCSA and something needs to be done, right? So they came out with some guidelines. The FMCSA sided, whether you guys know it or not, they kind of sided with the dispatcher. They said, look, dispatchers are always going to be needed, but here are the guidelines to define what dispatchers can and cannot do. So if a dispatcher does this, and this, then they are safe. If they do this, and this, they are acting outside of the realm of dispatching and they have to get an authority to become a broker. That was the guidelines that they came out with. So to answer your questions, it hasn't become law yet or any regulatory thing yet. So in other words, it hasn't been added to Title 49. So Title 49 is a title in what's called the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations under DOT. That's Title 49. So no rule has been added to that title yet to say that dispatchers should be this, or this, or dispatching is illegal. Dispatching is not illegal. It's not against the law to dispatch. Most people think it is. Most people say you can't be a dispatcher, you got to be a broker. Not true. So, and even the FMCSA says so. FMCSA says if you have a contract with you are a dispatching service, a business, and you come into an agreement with another business, a trucking company, two entities acting together in a business agreement, that is perfectly legal. Where the disconnect comes into play is when the dispatcher behaves as if they are a freight broker. The dispatcher cannot arrange for transportation of freight by getting a authorized motor carrier to do it and procuring it from a shipper, because they do not have the authority or the license to do that. That is why dispatchers partner and get into a dispatcher agreement with the motor carriers and then leverage their authority to get the loads from the brokers. That's perfectly legal. Dispatchers do not have the authority to go to the shippers and get those tenders, those load tenders from the shipper contractually. Number one. Number two, a shipper is not going to give it to them because shippers don't give tenders, load tenders, or contracts to dispatchers. They contract with the freight brokers. With a broker-shipper contract, they qualify the brokers because they need to see a copy of the broker's authority and their broker license. They need to see their bond and all these other qualifiers before they give them their $1 million or whatever the value of their freight is. They're not going to do that to a dispatcher. A dispatcher don't have any type of backing to substantiate or cover themselves from getting freight from shippers. They don't have the authority, right? So the FMCSA said, as long as dispatchers act within the realm of what dispatchers are designed to do, then they're perfectly safe. When it comes to a point where a dispatcher acts outside of that realm and starts behaving as a freight broker, posting loads on a load board, you can't do that. Dispatcher, you don't own that load. You don't have the authority or anything like that, right? Or doing other things that freight brokers do, then you are acting outside of your role of a dispatcher. And if you are caught doing that, they have the ability to fine you up to $10,000 and require you to get an authority to be a broker. Because now, if you're going to act like a broker, you might as well become one. That's what they're saying. But they're giving you leeway to behave as a dispatcher as long as you behave as a dispatcher. So how do you protect yourself from any liabilities? Stay within the realm of the guidelines of the FMCSA, right? So the question becomes, what is the realm of the guidelines of the FMCSA? I think I put those in our back office. I believe, LaDonna, I think we did that. I'll have to look and see in our back office. I think I put the guidelines of what the FMCSA said in their request, because they put out a request for comment. They put out what's called a request for comment over 3 or 4 months because they wanted feedback from everybody before they made their decision, which is fair. They wanted to hear from dispatchers, they wanted to hear from shippers, motor carriers, brokers before they made their decision. And then they request for comments turn into, okay, well, here's the guidelines that we want you guys to follow. If you say you're a dispatcher, then you should behave like this, and this. If you don't, then you're stepping into the realm of a broker. Then you are required to get your broker license or your broker authority. Otherwise, you are safe over here as a dispatcher. Okay? That's what they said. That's what the FMCSA said. Now, did some brokers not read this? Yes, because they're still circling back and saying the same thing. Did some motor carriers not read this? Yes, because they're still circling back and saying the same thing. Why are you acting like a broker? I am a dispatcher. I'm providing a dispatch service to you by putting loads on your trailer, keeping you running, adding to your bottom line, grossing you whatever you required, as long as it's realistic in this market, because this market right now is not realistic for a dry van, flatbed, or reefer to gross $8,000 to $10,000 right now in this market. 6 to 8 maybe, and you're pushing it there, right? And that's gross. That's not net. That's gross. So gross means you still got expenses to cover. You got overhead to cover, fuel, insurance, paying your dispatcher, whatever, right? So hopefully that helped, Crystal.
Yes, thank you. It was a good explanation. I appreciate it.
Okay. All right. Anyone else? I see Jason, you're unmuted. You got a question, Jason?
No question. I didn't know I was unmuted.
That's okay. I got you. Specialized freight is so specialized commodities go on specialized freight. Like specialized freight could be anything like oversized, overdimensional. Those are specialized types of freight because it requires extra things to be done. Like oversized and overdimensional, you need like flags on the tail of the trailers. You may need routing set up for it. You may need pilot cars. That's a form of specialized freight. Okay. When speaking with a factoring company, what referral questions should dispatchers have? I saw the carrier question in one of the back office. Great question. So when speaking with a factoring company, what referral questions should dispatchers have? So you're trying to set up a referral relationship with the factoring company where if you bring them a motor carrier for factoring that does not have factoring, and the factoring company sets them up for factoring with them, you should get some kind of kickback or referral. In addition to that, some factoring companies offer, when they pay the motor carrier that just got set up for factoring, they'll pay the dispatcher at the same time. Some factoring companies offer that as a service. We have one that does that. That's in our back office, 7 Oaks, Monica Case. If you go to services, affiliates and partners, factoring, there's Monica and her information. I think she changed something, but I'll have to get with her, updated information, but it's right here. She offers the ability to pay the dispatcher at the same time of paying the carrier. So the carrier has to deliver the load, turn in all the necessary information for billing or for invoicing, like the POD, the proof. The carrier has to turn in the proof of delivery, which is the signed BOL, and then they have to invoice them so that they can get paid. So when the factoring company sees all that, they'll pay what's due to them minus the cut that goes to the dispatcher, right? So for example, if you're factoring with 7 Oaks, for example, and your carrier, you booked a $3,000 load for your carrier and you charge 10%. How much is due to you, the dispatcher? How much should you be getting for that? Anyone? Whatever 10% of what is 10% of $3,000? 300. Very good. Everybody's typing 300 in the chat. So and you always get paid. Your calculation of what your payment should be is always from the gross amount of the load that was posted or whatever was negotiated, not the net, the gross. Okay, not the net. So if the broker posted a load for $3,000, but you happen to negotiate a little bit higher, 3,500, right? Now, I often say if you negotiate more because you want to include your money into it, then whatever's left over to change, I would say it goes to the carrier. And I also say take your percentage off of the original posted amount, the 3,000, 10% of 3,000, not 10% of 3,500. Because the 10% of 3,500, you're double dipping. You got 10% of 3,000 because it was posted for 3,000. That's what you would do. But you wanted to roll that 300 that you're getting from on top of that 3,000, so you added it to it in order to pull from the broker side as opposed to taking it out the carrier's pocket. Okay. So, and then so let's say it was $3,000 and you do 300. So when the carrier turns in that BOL, that POD to be paid, and it's being factored through Seven Oaks is going to send, how much are going to send to the carrier, and how much are you going to get out of the 3,000? If you're getting 10%, 2,700 to the carrier, 3,000 to the dispatcher. Very good. Simple math, right? So, what are some pointers? Jamisha asked, what are some pointers when booking loads and remembering both the time change and amount of time allotted for carriers at one time? That's a very good question. Well, the main pointer is experience, because as you over time, but being aware of time changes like daylight savings time and things like that. And when carriers are moving freight from one time zone to another time zone, let's say they got a load, they picked up a load on the East Coast, but it gets delivered, let's say in Virginia, but it gets delivered in St. Louis, right? So you're going to pass through a time zone, right? So you're going to go from Eastern time. Well, let me ask you, what time zone are you going from what time zone to what time zone are you going to go from Virginia to St. Louis? What's the time zone in Virginia? What time zone is Virginia? Eastern. And then what time zone is in Missouri? What time zone is in Missouri? Because they're central. Very good. So there's 4 time zones, right? And they're separated by an hour each. So let's start from the right to the left. Let's start from Eastern to Pacific. You got Eastern, Central, Mountain, Pacific, right? And they decrease by an hour from east to west. So if it's right now it's 7:08. So it's 7:08 here. I'm on the East Coast. I'm in Virginia. So in Central Time, what time is it now in the Central Time? If it's 7:08 here, what time is it Central? 6:08. What time is it Mountain? And then what time is it Pacific? Remember I said exactly, it goes down by an hour. So now you can tell. And then if you go from west back to east or Pacific back to Eastern, you increase it by an hour, right? So that's, as long as you can remember that, you can follow along with that. And then another concept in dispatching to be mindful of, because that's a great question, is your driver's hours of service. How long can they be driving? How many hours do they have to pick up their next load and things like that? Now, it is not the dispatcher's responsibility to keep track of that. Whose job is it? It's the drivers. They're in the truck. But you can be helpful in understanding of that concept, right? Just know the simple formula where 24 hours in a day, the drivers can be on duty 14 of the 24 hours. The other 10, the driver has to reset their hours, their clock in the 14 time frame. And then within the 14 on duty, within that 14 hours, 11 of which they can drive straight if they want. If they so choose, they can drive 11 of which, and then the other 3 hours they can do whatever. And then within the first 8 hours, there's a 30-minute break you know, they're making it, they're requiring it now. You must take it. It used to be optional, but now you must take it because they want to make sure that you did. So because of rest and weariness and things like that. So 24, just remember 24 hours in a day, 14 of which they can be on duty, 10 of which they have to reset their hours. And then within the 14, 11 of the 14, they can be driving straight. Okay. So when every load you book for your driver, you can just simply ask them, hey, I know we just did our last load. I'm getting ready to book your next load. Do you have enough hours to get this load? To at least pick the load up? Because there have been cases where I've picked the load up. I've had like 3 hours left before I had to do my reset. I had enough time to get the load. Then I drove to a rest stop and did my reset and still had enough time to make the delivery on time to the consignee. That's perfectly fine. If a driver feels they can't do that, they'll just say, no, let me do my reset first. Let me go to a local, I got 3 hours. Let's go to a local truck stop. I just delivered this load, just got off load. I got like an hour or two before I run out of, my clock runs out. Let me go to a rest stop, do my 10, and then find me something for, let's say it was like 3 o'clock that day. Find me something for tomorrow morning or at the latest tomorrow afternoon, right? That's the kind of relationship you want to get into with your driver too, because keeping track of those hours. And then as you do that over time, that's going to become like riding a bike. You're not going to even be thinking about that because you guys are going to be, you're going to be on top of that. What's up, Charles? C-Dub. All right. Any other questions? Let me go in the chat to see if there are any other questions. We got in the time zone. Full amount. What if the driver doesn't pay? What if the load doesn't pay the driver? Are we responsible for repayment to factoring company? That's a great question. Let me read this question all the way through. Full amount. What if the load doesn't pay? The load that you booked for your driver doesn't pay the driver. Are we, the dispatcher, responsible for, this is Joe asked this question, Joe Green. Are we responsible for repayment to the factoring company? I know our agreement says we get paid regardless of what happens to the load for our service. However, how does the factoring know that? The factoring doesn't know that. So you, the dispatcher, you're not involved in that payment process of whether, so drivers get paid one of 3 ways, right? They get paid directly from the shipper. They get a load directly from a customer, a direct shipment. They get paid from a load from a broker, a brokered load, right, that you may have booked with a broker for them, or they get paid through their factoring company. Those are the 3 ways that drivers can get paid. Dispatchers do not pay drivers. You book the load for the driver through a broker. The driver used their factoring company to factor that load. That was a decision that they made. They used their factoring company because they figure they can save money on the rate that the factoring company offered, the percentage, as opposed to the percentage of what the broker offered with their quick pay payment type, because brokers offer different types of payment options: quick pay, ACH transfer, or a paper check. So the driver at this time said, well, my factoring company gives me a better rate percentage to factor, so I'll go with the factoring company. So now driver delivers the load to the consignee, to the receiver. But for whatever reason, the shipper, because when they turn in all the paperwork to be paid to the because they're working with a factoring company, they turn in all the paperwork to be paid to the factoring company. Factoring company is going after the broker to recoup the money that they fronted to the carrier. Broker said, I can't pay you yet because my shipper hasn't paid me according to the net terms. So now that's a relationship between the factoring company, the broker, and that customer. Has nothing to do with the dispatcher, right? You're not liable to pay the carrier for non-payment because you're not one of the parties that should have paid the carrier initially. Your job was only to book the load for them and to be paid for that service. So you're due too, but you can't get paid until the carrier get paid. So you're kind of indirectly in that process, but you don't have to come out of your pocket as a dispatcher, right? That'll never be the case. If we can't speak to the shippers, how do dispatchers find dedicated lanes for carriers? Through the brokers. Brokers provide dedicated lanes, Brokers get dedicated lanes from their customers to shippers and then leverage that to the carrier. You don't have to necessarily, this is Magdalene, you don't have to, and everyone else too, you don't have to necessarily speak to a direct shipper to get dedicated freight. You can leverage that through the freight brokers because brokers get dedicated lanes from customers, from shippers. They're just using trucking companies to move the loads. The brokers are arranging for the transportation of the freight, right? So it's not always the case to get them those dedicated lanes directly from the customers, okay? So direct shipments and dedicated shipments are two different things. They mean two different things, okay? Great question, though. All right. I wanted to focus on the new people, the guests in here tonight who have not gotten the level of training they had paid for with other trainers. I wanted to answer some questions that the other trainers may not have answered for them. If you are one of those individuals, I'm more than happy to welcome your questions that you could get an answer from the person that you paid for the training for. Not us, but someone else you may have paid for. Because I did a video earlier today. For those of you who came in late, I did a video on YouTube and I made it public because I got a phone call from someone saying that they didn't even get their question answered by someone that they paid for training. They couldn't even call the person, contact them. My phone number is public. You can call me anytime you want. 757-515-1684. And this phone rings. I got missed calls right now in this training. So Minaj iPad says, how do we get a load for carriers without an MC? You don't. You don't get a load for carriers without an MC. That's not going to happen. You know why? Because a carrier cannot move a load, any freight in their truck without having an operating authority. That makes them legal. They are legally allowed to transport freight, commercial freight. You have to be legally allowed to do that. You have to have a motor carrier license, not license, but a certificate. A license is for the broker. So that's how you do it. You will never be able, never, ever, 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 like in Friday, don't ever, ever come back here. But you will never, ever, ever be able to move. If you get a carrier under a dispatcher agreement and you try to go book a load with a freight broker, you're not going to be able to do that. So now, if you ask that question, if they don't have an MC, but they have a DOT number, you can move it, but only within their state. Because having just a DOT number without an MC number means that they can work what's called intrastate. They can move freight within their state boundaries, within their state, like Texas. They can't go outside. Intrastate, or only so far outside, maybe 150-mile radius outside the state, but they have to come back. Okay. But if you don't have, so let me rephrase it. If you don't have an operating authority, so you can have an operating authority means you have either a DOT or an MC or both. So if you don't have an authority, that means you don't have anything, a DOT or an MC. But if you can have an authority with just a DOT without an MC, right? Because that's intrastate. And MC is interstate. So when you apply for an authority, an operating authority, you can apply as an interstate carrier or an intrastate carrier. But if you don't have anything, you can't move. You can't move any freight. You're not allowed to do so. It's not going to happen. So don't waste your time with that motor carrier. Or if they're willing to work with you, you got to let them know, like, look, you're not going to be able to transport freight unless you have an authority. Now, I know you don't have an MC, but let's be clear. Do you have an authority, at least a DOT? And then if they say no, then you definitely say, yeah, well, I can't work with you because you don't have either the low level of authority, which is the DOT, right? So you haven't applied for anything, an operating authority, whether it's intrastate or interstate, right? So you want to make sure that you, as a dispatcher, is educated enough to let them know, I'm willing to work with you, but you have to have the authority to be able to pick up the type of freight that I want to book for you to get for your trucking company. So, I took a previous dispatching course that wasn't interactive and none of my emails were answered. Now I'm seeing that stuff on IG that particular person is being accused of fraud. Oh yeah, I know who you're talking about. Please do your research, y'all, on your instructor before paying for anything. Yes, I understand what you're saying, Jamisha. Yes, it's unfortunate, but there are people that exist out here like that. So yeah. I'm a new member. I was trying to log into that portal, but it requested a code. Yeah, it comes to my phone, Wilkin, and it's a one-user license. I believe that was sent to your phone. Yes. Next time I log in, how can I bypass that? You can't bypass it. Either a code to my phone or an email to my phone. Whoever's on here who's a new member trying to use that, when you decide to use that, please send me a text prior to trying to log in. So when I get a code, because I get codes all the time, I'll know who to send the code back to so that you'll be able to get into the DAT. That is for security reasons. That is a feature that DAT instituted called MFA, multi-factor authentication. They're trying to remove a lot of people logging into their software without permission. So they gave the account holder, me, the ability to bypass that by giving either a code through a cell phone number or through an email. It is what it is. If you don't like that, then we have the other load boards in there that you can use without going through that process. You just log in and just have your way. Okay? That is something that had set up. Matter of fact, I just got a text now. Someone may have sent me a code. So, can you explain the process of cold calling? When you gather information before calling a carrier, how much time should be spent before calling a carrier the first time? Example, company name, active, risk factor. Yes, you want to get as much data. I understand your question now, Joe. Equipment types, regions, tracking how many calls and stuff. Yes, you want to get as much data about the carrier up front before you call them, so you'll appear more educated about their company. So when you start asking your questions, you'll be able to get the right answer so that you can continue that conversation with that carrier, and you're indirectly qualifying them on the phone, or you're vetting them based off of their responses to your questions, right? How much money you need? Hey, this is Charles, or this is Joe Green's dispatching service. Are you under load, looking for your load for your drive-in? Or you may not even know their equipment type. So what equipment type do you have? How much are you trying to gross per week? What is your average cents per mile for moving a load? What areas of the country or zones do you want to go back and forth under? How much home time? How much time you want to be on the road, and how much time you want to be home? So you're indirectly asking them profile type questions, right? Over the phone. You could be writing this stuff down as you're talking to them. And then if they are as engaging at that point, chances are you might win them. You know? So, Crystal, in the process of booking a load and talking to the broker, how do you responsibly determine if your driver be at pickup location during the time frame, given traffic, right? You don't know that. The driver will have to let you know. If they're getting like in a traffic jam and things like that, they'll either call you to call the broker, or they'll call the broker directly in situations like that. You have to trust that driver in that relationship right there, and to the point where you guys have built up enough rapport with each other that it becomes second nature. But initially, you want to stay on top of them, especially with that very first load with the driver. You want to make sure you follow through, not to the point where you're pressing them, but that you are making sure that things are getting done efficiently, so that all parties involved have enough effective communication that this shipment that's being picked up, transported safely, and delivered is done securely and on time. So those are the things you want to make sure, right? And most brokers will track, they'll require drivers to put an app on their phone like Macro Point or these different GPS tracking apps so they can track the carriers. So they can do what's called check calls. Birds Logistics, Derek, you got your hand raised. Yes, sir. If you can unmute yourself.
Hey, how's it going?
Yes.
Yeah, so I got all the stuff that we've been talking about. I got a really good general idea about these things. I was curious in the how-to video series. I haven't looked at it yet. Do you have in there what I struggle more with is like on the with the carrier packets and all the stuff that we have to give to the carrier and everything, like converting it to a PDF and then getting all that and then sending an email, things to do with like the paperwork side on the computer and stuff like that.
Administrative stuff.
Yes, sir, because like I've watched many hours of all this other stuff and I got my LLC, I'm ready to go. I just getting all this the administrative stuff down so that I can just go and do it when it needs to be done so that I can be I need more information in those or there's like walkthroughs on something like that maybe because that's kind of what's holding me up.
Okay. Well, right here in the how-to video series, let me go back to the main page of the the portal, and under tools, docs, resources. And for those of you who are guests, you don't have access to this, but at least you can see it, right? How-to video series is new. So we've created videos. Everything you see back here, the links, these are hyperlinks to the videos of the topics. So you're saying, so my booking and loads. So I did a booking loads for drive-in, flatbeds, and reefers, videos on that, and then filling out the carrier packets. How to do that. Click that. I'm going to mute the sound. But this is a 25-minute video on how to fill out the carrier packets and the rate confirmations, I believe, as a dispatcher for your carrier. Okay, the how-to video on that. And then the how-to video on how to book a load for your carriers, booking loads for a drive-in, booking loads for a flatbed, booking loads for a reefer, right? And then other how-to video series. Let's go down a little bit more. How to actually do the dispatcher agreement, how to fill it out and turn it from a Word document to a PDF, limited power of attorney, and the carrier profile. The three main documents that we talk about all the time, how to do that, right? In video format, dispatch agreement, how to take it from a Word document, put it into your company's information, right? And then transfer it to a PDF and either upload it into a e-signature type of format or send it directly to the carrier, right? So we go and I got a Word document open and I'm creating it in Word and then saving it as a PDF and then either sending it as an attachment to an email to the carrier as a PDF, or if you have the budget, purchase some kind of e-signature software where you can import the PDF into the e-signature software, and then there's elements in there, like DocuSign, for example. They have what's called elements, like a text element or a name element or a number element. So you drag the element to the area that you want the person to click to be able to put their information into. And then when you put it into that type of format, then you save it and you send that saved link to the driver, either in email format or as a text. Okay? So, all right. You says, what does it run and what do you recommend? Oh yeah, e-sign. Yeah, so e-signature software, like an e-signature software like DocuSign, Adobe Reader, PDF Escape, JotForm. I think JotForm is free. So you can Google these ones, JotForm, DocuSign. The reason I mentioned DocuSign, because years ago I used DocuSign, so I got familiar with the elements of how to do that. But JotForm is free, JOTFOM. I'm sorry, FORM. So you can import first of all, take our Word template in our back office, edit it to your company's information, change our names to your company's names, your logos, whatever you have, and even the verbiage. If you don't agree with some of the verbiage in there, but remember, this is just a template. So you can change the verbiage as you see fit because everybody's dispatching philosophy could be different. So your philosophy on certain things that I say in the Word document may not be what you agree to. So change it to what you agree to. I have no problem with that. It's a template, right? So that you save it as the Word format. Now you got your saved, completed version of yours for your company. Then you save it and change the file type from Word to PDF. It is there from the PDF version. You import the PDF file into whatever e-signature software that you're using. DocuSign, JotForm, whichever one. Okay? And then you go from there. Okay? And then there is a form in Wix. I have one on Wix. I used to use one in Wix. Wix has one called Wix Forms, Joe. But then we have one called Epic Form Builder. So, yep. Tiffany, I need to put a step-by-step process on how you recommend us to set up our business after we get our LLC approved. Well, after you get your LLC approved, your next step is just to attach your EIN to that. Because having an LLC means you've already got your business name registered and everything like that, and you got your structure together. You chose an LLC. Now you have to make it official by attaching going to the irs.gov website, Tiffany, and putting your LLC information in, because before the IRS assigns a EIN number, a random 9-digit EIN number, they need to know that you formed your company, your LLC, your structure. So, and then once you get all that, like Jamisha just said, you go out and get your bank account, because before you can get a bank account, the bank account needs to know that you have a business set up. The way to prove to the bank that you have a business set up is you have to have your articles of organization or your articles of corporation or all the documents that they require, right? So before you progress in the next step, you have to have the previous steps completed first. Okay. Very good questions, by the way. Derek, hopefully that helped. I want to make sure I circle back to Derek because did that help you, Derek? Okay, very good. All right. More questions. I'm glad I'm touching some of these questions. Hopefully these are answering some of the questions that some of you individuals may not have gotten answered by some of the people that you have gotten training from that didn't answer these questions or weren't even able to get a hold of. I've heard horror stories. I don't want to say I'm sick and tired of people calling me for other instructors who didn't provide a service to them. I actually welcome that, because it just says that it's unfortunate, but I want to make sure that you get as detailed an answer that you actually understand what you needed to understand in order to move on to the next progression in your stage in understanding how to dispatch, right? If you can't get a simple question answered about certain equipment types and things like that, you're going to be stuck in that area. You got to understand why this equipment type is more important than this other one. What's the reason behind that? Why should you focus on these major equipment types first before you specialize in box trucks and all these other things, right? Because if you go out on, like, again, if there's major interstates, let me show you what I mean by the major interstates. If you go out on any major interstate and you throw a rock on any of these major interstates, right? And you can hit one of the major right there, interstates. Blow it up a little bit. So these are all the major interstates. I don't know if you've seen this map before. You probably have. These are the major interstates in the United States, right? And major interstates. So you have interstates, you have state routes, and then you have the highways, right? So these are the interstates. These are connecting the interstates out here. These are where most of the tractor trailers, the three major equipment types, run, right? Doing most of their over the road work. They may get off on state routes and state highways to get to their final destinations, you know, because they may be off the interstates, right? But these are the major interstates. If you notice, and I'll throw this out there for those most of you know this who've been in the training, but some of you who are in here as guests now may not know. The odd number interstates, 75, 85, things like that, right? They are north and southbound, right? 75 north, 85 south, things like that, right? The even number interstates are east and westbound. You see that? Interesting. I look at Crystal. I saw your expression, Crystal. Interesting, right? Odd numbers are north and south. Evens are east and west. Here's a trivia question for you. Which interstate, because you notice the United States, it touches 2 international countries, right? United States, Canada to the north, Mexico to the south. You agree? We touch Mexico and Canada. The United States do. North of us is Canada. That's an international country. South of us is Mexico. That is an international country. Agree? Which one interstate goes north and touches Canada and Mexico? It's odd number. It's north to southbound. Looking at this map, which one? 35. Very good, Derek. 35. Look at that. 35. Canada. That's Canada right there. I think it's I'm trying to remember what country. I think it's Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. And it goes down all through the states, right? Boom, 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 boom. And it hits Mexico right there. Boom. Someone said 95. I think 95 doesn't. 95 ends at the tip of Maine right here, and it goes down all the way to Florida. At the end of Florida, you're going to be in the Atlantic Ocean. So it's not 95, it's 35. Comes right, 30. I-35 comes right through Texas and hits Mexico right there, down there at the very end. Because you got McAllen all the way down there, McAllen and Corpus Christi and all this other ones down there, Brownsville. And then north, it goes up to the northern side. So just some trivia to know. But understanding, so some of this stuff, as a dispatcher, is good to know, but it's not as important as the basics, right? But you can use this information to kind of leverage your knowledge as a dispatcher. You know, where you at? You on 95? Or you are you heading northbound or southbound? Or are you on 64? You going east or westbound? Which way you going? Which are you approaching? What mile marker you at? Next, I'm going to get into mile markers. Now, this is not as important for the dispatchers, but it's some good truckers need to know it. Mile markers, right? Because some states mile markers and their exit numbers are relatable, right? When you get off at exit 5, mile marker 5, or going towards mile marker 6, you'll pick up on that. That way you can help when you get into traffic jams or you have a blowout or you need to know, let AAA know where you are. I'm near a mile marker, such and such. They'll know exactly where you are. They can pinpoint and send somebody directly to you. So, okay. Let me scroll back up and see some questions. What about business address? I use my home address, and now I was told I should have not used my home address, so I need to amend my LLC. It's not recommended to use your home address. It's not against the law, but it's not recommended. If you can get another address, like going through like Regis or I forget the other companies, for a VO or a VA, a virtual address or a virtual office, that to assist you, or a brick and mortar. Like I have a brick and mortar. Like my address, my business address now is a physical address. So here. This is where I'm at. I was just there tonight before I came home to train. I was going to train in the office, but I said, let me get home. So once I get done training. So Opus, Alliance, and Regis, very good. Those are virtual offices, but this is where I'm at. So if you notice, right there, I'm in Suite 21A. Right there, you notice on that screen, it says Exodus Logistics Learning Center on the professional board right there. In front of the building, it says Exodus Logistics Learning Center right there, right? So you can, let me see if I can blow it up. I don't know. I'm not good at, no, I'm all over the place. I done went to the back of the building. But anyway, that's where I'm at. Exodus Logistics Learning Center. Okay. There we go. Right there, where it says Exodus Logistics Learning Center right there, right above Nationwide. Matter of fact, I'll be going down there and bugging them about commercial insurance. They give me crazy quotes. I'm like, nah, I will never use you guys. You guys charge too much money. So, but there it is. Exodus Logistics Learning Center, 3101 American Legion Road, Suite 21A, Chesapeake, Virginia, 23321. So, okay. So you can use that as your physical address. You can use a virtual address, brick and mortar. So yes, and that's a very good point LaDonna just made. Make sure you check out the difference between a virtual office and a virtual address. The address, and you can have office space. You're using someone else's office space and address as your own, right? Which is the virtual office concept. And then the virtual address is just the address concept. But make sure you check it out on YouTube, the difference between that. So that way you can do that. Should you have a different virtual address for each business that you have? If they are not related and you have the budget to do so, Shiante, then that would probably be more a sensible thing, right? Because let's say for example, if you were going into the government space, like grants and set asides and dealing with government stuff, and you got a dispatch service and your government type of service company at the same address, right? On the government side, that would be a red flag for them, right? In order to give you set asides, because they're going to vet you out, especially when you register with SAM.gov and then you get your UEI cage, and then you have to register. In us in Virginia, we have what's called EVA, which is our solicitation listing services for buyers in Virginia to solicit to you, the vendor, right? So if you got a same address as your dispatching service, as your vendor service, that could be a red flag as well, right? Then bid match, you're going to be bidding for federal contracts, acquisitions.gov, you're going to be bidding. So these different addresses could be a conflicting kind of thing. So, or it may not, but I would rather not put myself in that riskful situation than to do it, right? So, and if you particularly, Shiantik, I forgot, you're the real estate person. So if you were to get into government spacing, I would definitely list yourself as a real estate vendor, because there's a lot of, I've been looking online in my electronic Virginia state and local and government and port soliciting buyers portal, and it shows a ton of real estate solicitations. So if you decide to get into the government sector or even the state and local sector, I would definitely, real estate is out there. So you can solicit you can get a bid for that. Request for information, a request for quote or RF, request for a bid. So what do I mean by EVA? EVA.gov. This is Virginia's local vendor, local solicitation for local, state, and government set-asides and contracts. You have to be registered with locally to get set-asides on the local level, not on the state level. Are there opportunities for government grants for dispatchers? Interesting question.
Contracts.
Interesting question. Yes. Yes. You have to strategically though. Yeah, you got to search for them. Like one of the things I saw on there was something called arrangement for transportation, but that sounds like a broker. But you want to list, so when you do your NAICS codes or your NIGPs, your National Institute for Government Purchasing, and your PSCs, your product and service codes, you want to relay it in the transportation space as close as possible. Anything that's going to involve tractor trailers or long distance transportation. That way you can become the prime contractor as a dispatching business and then sub it out to the people who actually need to do the work, which are the trucking companies. So yes, you can do it that way. So as long as you're strategic with it, then yes. But I've been like for the past 3 hours before I got on this training, I was doing my NAICS codes, my North American industry standard, right? Those codes, industry system. I forget what NAICS stands for. What is NAICS? North American Industry Classification System. I think it is, right? NAICS, and then the IGPs or NAIGPs or NIGPs, the National Institute for Government Purchasing, and then the PSCs, which is the product and service codes. You have to enter all those different qualifications in there. You have to prepare your capability statements, your past performance, your core competencies, and your differentiators. So you're in the same space as other people, but what differentiates you from them in such a way that a government or a state or a local government agency will come after you because your differentiator was more different than theirs, that it piqued their interest, right? So, Derek said, what kind of monthly budget am I looking at for all my tools I need to use? Load boards, virtual. So Derek, you can kind of piecemeal that, right? On an as needed basis. You don't have to get all of it at once. You can kind of piecemeal that stuff. So what are some of the most important things you need up front as a dispatcher, right? Load boards, right? So as long as you're in our platform, in our 90-day training, you get an abundance of load boards, like 6 or 7 of them, right? So that's an expense you can curb, right? Virtual address, registered agent. You could be your own registered agent, DocuSign, administrative tools, so on and so forth. But I would say from a broad dollar amount, that's a very good question though. From a broad dollar amount, and on a monthly basis, not a general overall. I would say 300 to 500, maybe 300 to 500, and that's being nice, right? Roughly 400 to 500 a month, right? But that can decrease because you can piecemeal some of that stuff. Some of that stuff you don't need all at once. You just need it as it comes along on level of importance, right? So, and shop around for each thing that you need. Shop around for the top 3 of that particular product, like the top 3 load boards or the top 3 virtual addresses, like LaDonna just listed, Alliance, Opus, and Regis. The top 3 of all the other tools, the top 3 of e-signature, DocuSign, JotForm is free. So you can eliminate DocuSign as an e-signature. JotForm is free because you just need some of the basic features. DocuSign has some advanced features. You don't need all that stuff. You just need the ability to put your newly created PDF template into an e-signature form, update it, edit it to the fields that you want the carriers to fill out, sign it, and send it back to you. JotForm provides all of that, and it's free. So you just eliminate that expense right there. So you can take out DocuSign. Load boards, as long as if you are enrolled in our 90-day self-paced program, you get about 5 or 6 load boards as part of the 90-day process, the program. So that's another expense you just eliminated, right? At least for 90 days. Virtual addresses, you may not need that right now. But if you want it, it's totally up to you guys. You choose how you want to expense your company. What is your overhead? You decide that. You can piecemeal it, or if you have the budget, then you can do it all at once. You know, keep your overhead as low as possible, your operating costs, so your profit margin, right? The art of business. Track everything. Okay. So, all right. Yeah, so a ballpark figure. So you do everything a ballpark figure, 400 to 500 ballpark. And it's going to be less than that, but 400 to 500 will be, okay. All right, good. Great question. All right, we got about 5 minutes. Any other final questions? Now, Saturday, we're not having training. Just want to say that. Veterans Day, Saturday. And if you need veterans in here, thank you for your service. Muchly appreciated. As much as I have my reservations about this country, it's still a good country to live in. So thank you for your service. We don't say that enough. For those of you who really fought for the country. So, but anyway, so Saturday, the 11th. So our next Zoom training will be Sunday the 19th. I'm looking at my calendar. The following week, which is the 13th through the 17th, I'm having the in-person training at the Logistics Learning Center. I just showed you my office. We have a conference room. We have a 1,900 square foot facility. I just showed you on the picture that we have our trainings at. Shiante's been there. There's several other people who's been there. So we're having another one. We're having one for dispatchers Monday through Friday and freight brokering. And you can stay for both if you want. It doesn't matter to me, right? For those who come for free, if you are local in the 757, and if you're local in the 757 and you are enrolled in our ongoing training, you are eligible to attend our live in-person trainings anytime you want to get that added training. That's the extended thing. You're welcome, Mr. Walker. That's Charles Walker. How are you doing, sir? So the 13th to the 17th, that Monday through Friday, I will be training live in person, writing on a chalkboard and explaining things very thoroughly, going over things like that. So yes. Do you offer weekend training? The live in-person trainings started off as weekend trainings, but I switched it to week-long trainings because more people were asking about week-long trainings. Do you offer weekend training for people that live out of state? I may have to do that because I'm getting some feedback now from people who are out. Now, I've had people come from out of state. I had people come from Maryland, Ohio. Miss Gina, I think she came from Ohio. She was traveling. She was like a nomad. She was coming from Ohio, came to our training for a week. Then she went down to Florida, and she went back to Ohio. So, but we had fun while she was here. It was nice. But we made her cry too, because I don't know if you guys saw the video, because we poured much love on her. We loved on her because we gave out the certificate, and I gave away, each attendee, I gave away a $50 gift card to what was it, Shiante? Applebee's, I think it was, or
it was Texas Roadhouse.
Texas Roadhouse. I gave away each attendee a $50 gift card to Texas Roadhouse and then a certificate. So we poured love, and I think we had lunch a few times too. I think we went out to lunch after some of the classes. So my wife and I, they met my beautiful wife, and so yeah, it's more like a family setting. It was nice. So, but yeah, but you got the training. So, and I'm going to start bringing in some of my local broker friends, my local trucking friends, so they can actually speak to the dispatchers, right, and the brokers, to give you a more real world experience. So just adding more value to the trainings, the Exodus Logistics Learning Center. At some point, this is gonna blow up, and people are gonna hear about this, and they'll be like, wait a minute, he's doing what? So, but it'll happen. I'm not even concerned about that. I like the more family, close-knit, inner circle kind of thing. It's more intimate, and there's more value with that, right? I don't like the whole mega church feel. I got to speak on a microphone and talk to thousands of people. I don't want to do like Joel Osteen and teaching to a mega church kind of audience. No, I want to be right in your face and give you the answer, make the eye contact, and make sure that you got it. So, okay. All right, guys. Are we good? Yes, you can. Anybody can do that, Mr. Walker. Says, can you connect with us outside of the Zoom calls? Further assist me with learning more about dispatching. I too new to all of. Yes, of course. Of course. That's a no-brainer. I connect within the Zoom because I think I put you in there for free for the self-paced for the 90-day course. So yes, you can communicate with us, email, text, however, right? So hopefully those of you who are in here as guests has gotten some content for yourself that can kind of keep you motivated on dispatching, and hopefully I've answered some of the questions that you may not have gotten answered in the past. That was my goal today, because I've heard people saying they're not getting that. Oh, hey, Charles, where's the referral section again? Okay, Ms. Jacqueline asked, so under services on the website, so you go to the homepage first, because if you want to refer someone, we actually pay referrals. If you refer someone and enroll, you get paid, right? So here's the process to that though. Under services, referrals, right there. So you can refer someone either to the dispatch program, single member, or 2-for-1, or the freight broker program, single member or 2-for-1. In both cases, make sure you fill out the referral form prior to the person that you are referring signing up, right? So I need to have a receipt in my hand before I can pay you, because I need to know that you were the person that referred that person. So fill out the form and you click this and it comes up as a light box in front of the screen. You fill it out, the person you are referring, their name, their phone number, their email, and then which dispatcher, or in the other case, the freight broker program today that you referred them for. Single member or 2-for-1. I need to change this to $3.99 because it's $3.99 now. I from now to the end of the year, I decreased the price of the single member program by $200. So this single member should be $3.99 and the 2-for-1 should be $6.99. I'm going to edit that and change that. I'm glad I saw that. It's a good point. So fill this out, and then the referrer's name, which is you referred that person. So you are the referrer. Your name, your phone number, email. So I'll know who to pay. So you need to submit that. And then when that person enrolls, you just simply let me know, or we'll see it. And I go into the database and check, okay, was this person referred? So whoever that person was, I'll pay you Cash App or however you want to get paid. You get paid directly, right? Like, boom, right? So, all right. Thank you, everyone, for asking great questions. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Jamisha. Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Jacqueline, everybody. All right. We're good? Very good. Hello, Pamela. Right. The 90-day training is $3.99, not $5.99. I'm glad you asked that question. Let's go to the main page. So under Dispatcher 101, under the products menu, all of our products, the most popular one, and it's even marked most popular, $3.99. You click that, and it takes you to this page right here. We're having an end of year extravaganza, $200 off, reduced price, and it's already marked $3.99. It's not $200 off of the $3.99. It's $200 off of the original price, $5.99, which it says so right here. It was $5.99. Now it's $3.99 for the single member, and then the 2-for-1. It was $8.99. Now it's $6.99. Okay, $200 off. So the $3.99 price will already be there. So, yep, I think it's worth it. $300-$400. This is an investment. 90 days at that price, and all the content you get, access, the resources, the tools, live trainings. What about the broker class? Great question. Let's go to the broker side, even though this is dispatcher, but we'll give you the broker. You're talking about the price points. Same thing, $200 off. It's just different. It was $8.99 for the single member. You just take $200 off. And someone said, what's all included? How much How much after a month? Let's go back to the dispatcher class to show you what that is. Because if you stay on that page and you scroll down, it'll tell you what's all included right here. If you please read this below right there to answer that question. So after 90 days, it'll be, if you want to continue monthly, it's $34.99 per month to maintain everything that you have gotten access to in the 90 days. If you want to keep going on a month to month to month basis, you can continue at $34.99 a month. And my wife will send you an email reminder 1 week prior to your 90 days becoming expired. And your 90-day clock doesn't start until you submit to have access to the portal. You can enroll and say, hey, I'm not going to access the portal until maybe next week. I'm about to vacation or whatever. So the moment you get approved for access is when your 90-day clock starts. Okay, it's not when you enroll, but it's when you're approved. That way it's fair to you, right? Because you can enroll and not start your clock, but you don't access the portal until a week later. You just lost a week. That's not fair to you. I'd rather start your clock the moment you get approval for the back office. That makes sense? So we try to be fair, always trying to be fair, right? All right, guys, our next live Zoom training will be Sunday the 19th, right before Thanksgiving. And then, yeah, the 19th at 11 a.m. Sunday. And I send out reminders, emails, and stuff like that, okay? We won't have training this Saturday, Veterans Day, okay? Again, veterans, thank you for your service. We salute you. Thank you very much. That's it, guys. And all of those who attended tonight as guests, if you have an interest, reach out to me. If you have an interest in training or any other questions for that matter, you may not want training, but you want a question. You may set up a consultation perhaps, or just ask the general questions. If it's going to be 5 minutes or less, I can answer the questions free of charge. If you want something more like 30 minutes or an hour, then we'll set up a consultation for you. Okay. All right. Very good. Nice crowd tonight. Great questions. I really appreciate the questions. I love questions because it keeps me sharp and it's proof positive to you guys that your instructor knows what they're talking about, right? And that's refreshing. I'd rather get training from someone I know that they know what they're doing, right? That's always a good thing, right? So, all right, guys. Have a safe weekend. Be safe. Of course, you can reach me whenever you have any questions. I'm always around. Trust me. I have to slow down a little bit because my blood pressure was 210 over 149 at stroke level. I wasn't playing. So I need to curb that, work on my respiratory infection of my lungs, the mucus. So I have to, my wife says, you got to balance it, right? So she kind of put me on punishment. So I got to balance it a little bit, right? It's always the case. Your health is very important, right? So, all right, guys, thank you.